I wanted to start this by making a sarcastically satirical joke about today the world, but the last few months have just been kinda depressing. More so than usual, so fuck it. My top things of autumn/fall 2020. For anyone new to the channel, or just unfamiliar with the concept, this is a seasonal series inspired by Super Eye Patch Wolf's My Favorite Things, Clemps' Things I Loved, and all the other semi-regular media and merch roundup videos you can find online, in which I review, ramble about, and recommend some of my favourite stuff from the last few months, with the occasional out-of-season straggler. And if you know something isn't here, then it probably means one of a few things. I didn't get around to it by the time I made this video. Even if I did enjoy it, I have too many caveats and criticisms to recommend it. I just didn't like it. I don't have a lot to say about it beyond it was fun, it was cool, it was intense or heartbreaking in the best way, or I want to make a proper video about it and want to save as many of my thoughts on it for that as I can. So with that out of the way, it's probably best to start this by blasting through some things I found. There's been a lot of cool stuff floating around the internet over the last while that's been a lot of fun to lose myself in. Whether it be the cool or cute ads that have no right to be as good as they are, the surreal and stylish music videos both independent and company backed that keep popping up in my recommended, the many video essays and deep dives into things as concerning as the Flat Earth movement, as outrageous as fandom obsessions and controversies, and as meta as the very nature of video game analysis itself, or all the peak internet stuff like the kayfabe-esque muppetry of watching VTubers do their thing, or the indescribable awe of the spontaneous collaborative creativity of all those TikTok people making a Ratatouille musical. But what I found myself being most appreciative of over the last while has been running into specific channels with a strong dedication to their craft that I think deserve far more attention. Like Lines in Motion, a video essay channel focused on animated and illustrated media whose breakdowns clearly and concisely get across both the core appeal of the work she covers through well-written technical and thematic analyses, and the care she has for them, something that's made even more striking not only by the fantastically creative editing, motion graphics, and imagery used to illustrate her points, but also in the work that's clear to see being poured into even a more throwaway video.
You see, as lovely and hilarious as Alone is, they lack experience with the outside world as a consequence of having lived in solitude alongside their grandpa. Their knowledge on the other science, the division of lands, and the new laws on magic are all completely new to them. But with a little bit of guidance and bumping into the snazziest, cutest, and most adorable bird companion I have ever seen, Elowen takes the journey into exploring a world that was hidden from them throughout most of their life.
Granted, the channel is relatively new and only has a few videos, but I think they're all worth checking out. But not all these channels are new. In fact, Beyond the Bot is a revival of Get in the Robot, a Frederator-backed channel where a cavalcade of hosts, Dory, Yedoye, Crystal, Wai Chang, and Kurt, explore interesting and often under-discussed facets of the anime landscape that was unfortunately shut down in mid-summer. But rather than let it and the community they'd fostered stay dead, the cast and crew behind it went independent, and got back on the grind with some fascinating videos looking into the unique quirks of the medium on a narrative and community level, and the wider impact it's had on various cultures, both online and off as a whole.
I remember getting an argument with Adrian over the subject, and he said, and I quote, I gotta actually go through my messages here. IDK, I'm fine with people liking Rem, but I hate when people shit on me for choosing Amelia, which is why it's now become a show I actively avoid. You avoid it because of... And it made me think, why do we care so much? Why does Adrian care so much?
It's pretty cool that they were able to pick themselves back up after what seemed like the end, something I doubt many people would be able to come back from, and I'm glad to see them doing so well after the fact. Hades is an indie roguelike developed by Supergiant Games where you play as Zagreus, the son of the titular King of the Underworld, who seeks to escape the literal hell he calls home to reconnect with his mother in the mortal world, but soon finds that the path there is filled with a lot more cracks than he expected. And just like Zagreus learning about his mom, the game gives the player just as many twists to play with. On a mechanical level, the bullet hell chaos of its dungeon crawling is so fun to get lost in, and provides lots of options to experiment with, both in earned weapons and upgrades and stroke of luck buffs from the gods. My personal favourite weapon is the shield, because it is the best one to button mash, and no, I am not sorry. And for the runs, it takes a page out of Enter the Gungeon's handbook, building the randomized nature of each one not on procedural generation, but by randomly pushing you through hand-sculpted chambers. It even has a pretty clever justification for its Deathloop in-world, leaning into its Greek mythological inspirations and the non-linear storytelling such a cyclical structure offers in some really interesting ways, and as a result, gives the player some surprisingly compelling reasons to run through its hellscape over and over again. It plays with its premise in really interesting ways both mechanically and narratively. Also, in true ancient Greek fashion, there's a romance mechanic, which lets you woo the cute Gorgon, the hot whip girl, and the hot scythe boy all at the same time. Oh, be still my beating heart. And as a tie-in to my last video, one of the cooler things about it is how much the studio behind it did to avoid the toxic crunch culture that dominates the gaming industry, building an environment that encourages staff to take care of themselves and management that actively steps in to ensure they actually can, and which is especially cool to hear about after some recent and notable disasters whose shit shows, in large part, came about because of an over-reliance on unnecessary crunch that made it easy for mistakes to be made and missed. It's just nice to see a studio that seems to be just as good as the games they make. #Alive is a South Korean zombie film directed by Cho Il-hyung and produced by Zip Cinema and Perspective Pictures, which follows Oh Jun-woo, a gaming live streamer who, hear me out! Look, I genuinely think this is one of the most solid zombie films I've seen in a while. I say this as a big zombie fan, but it's one of those things that at the best of times easily falls into the same old tropes and ideas, even the ones with more interesting twists to the concept. And I had my doubts about this one too, but it honestly surprised me with how much it scaled its story down to the bare basics. It takes place in a single apartment complex and spends the majority of the runtime in a few apartments and hallways, limiting both the characters' and audience's perspective on the situation and making the dread that comes with the scenario even more intense, something that's only heightened by its focus on just surviving, as the characters realize how few supplies they have, panic as their water and electricity gets cut, and bracing themselves to sneak into neighbouring apartments for supplies, and risking running headfirst into an undead horde. There's something so compelling about the almost primal nature of its stakes, and it makes even the simplest of situations that much more tense, which is backed by some incredible technical prowess in its camera work and direction. And I think it's a film that works as well as it does, at least in part, because of the state of the world it was released into. I mean, sure, everyone staying indoors because of a scary virus is quite relatable, but on a more fundamental level, its emphasis on the isolation that comes with it, the loneliness of not being able to see friends or family for days, weeks, and even months on end, the paranoia of not knowing whether or not they're okay, and the joy of being able to make any kind of connection in this situation, is something I think we've all become painfully familiar with over this last year. #Alive's simple but effective execution not only makes for a compellingly tense experience, but I think also perfectly captures the specific emotions and struggles of our world's current circumstances, even if it is a little dramatized. I think it'd be an understatement to say that the pandemic has put a bit of a strain on the anime industry, as many studios have had to restructure their workflows or shut down temporarily to cope, and many shows have had to be delayed for entire seasons or just indefinitely, leaving the anime landscape feeling a little dry in recent months. However, I think there have still been plenty of great shows that have come out that seem to have gotten swept under the rug. So to help give them a little spotlight, I want to break the format here a little, with a lightning round listicle I like to call the top 11-ish anime in no particular order from the latter half of 2020 that you may have missed and that I think are good and you should check out because I want more people to talk about them, please. God, why did I do that title sequence to myself? Starting with the ridiculousness that is Appare-Ranman, an original anime series directed by Masakazu Hashimoto and produced by PA Works, set in the 19th century as, after an engineering experiment gone wrong, the titular boy genius Appare and his samurai friend Kosame find themselves on the other side of the planet, with their only hope of getting home being a race across America, and on the way run into all kinds of colourful competitors as they storm across the new world wacky races style. Sure, no one thing about it is unique, but the specific way in which it brings these clashing designs, aesthetics, and on-the-nose influences together feels almost unreal, particularly in its cast, whose time-appropriate tropes range all the way from the aforementioned samurai, to martial arts masters and well-to-do fencers, to terrifying outlaws, professional outlaws, hip-hop outlaws, and outlaw outlaws. God, that word has lost all meaning in my brain. It has a lot of fun exploring the quirks of its Wild West setting, and I absolutely adore the way it does so. But it's not all historical nonsense, as there have been plenty of speculative sci-fi series that envision the many turns our world could take in the near and far future, like Decadence, which I already made a whole last video on and I am not repeating myself, or Akudama Drive, an original anime series directed by Tomohisa Taguchi and co-produced by Pierrot and 2Kyo Games, set in a dystopian future where supercriminals known as Akudama run rampant, and government-backed executioners hunt them down as a young girl soon to be known as Swindler gets caught up in a criminal conspiracy. And it's more than happy to indulge in the utter insanity of such an edge-soaked premise, with all the neon weapons, explosive gore, and impossibly fitting anime bullshit asspulls one could dream of. However, for as over-the-top as it is, it also gives way to a story concerned with the very nature of criminality and justice in a world where punishment has become glorified, and whose questions about it on an individual and institutional level, and the almost religious fervor through which it explores it, are something its cyberpunk stylings are almost perfectly equipped to help it answer. But if you want more traditional cyberpunk, then I think No Gun's Life, directed by Naoyuki Ito, produced by Madhouse, and based on the manga of the same name by Tasuku Karasuma, might scratch that itch, as it's set in a world where robotic augmentations, known as extensions, have become commonplace, and people with them, called Extended, have turned to crime to survive in its post-war peacetime. The story itself follows Juzo Inui, a man with a gun for a head, who specializes in extended crimes, whose life gets turned upside down after finding himself being asked to protect a young boy with a valuable augmentation. In spite of what its character's ridiculous and sometimes horny designs may imply, it's a lot more grounded than one would expect, feeling like an old-fashioned hard-boiled detective story as this tired old PI navigates a gritty world riddled with corruption, and whose slow-burn reveal of the conspiracy surrounding this kid and its setting's-defining technological features makes its main character question his own past as a cog in this world's great corporate machines and his place in this world generally. And fittingly, it's not the only show built around such ethical dilemmas as of late, as plenty of recent crime dramas have dived into similarly uncomfortable questions of morality, like Moriarty the Patriot, directed by Kazuya Nomura, produced by Production IG, and based on the manga of the same name by Ryosuke Takeuchi and Hikaru Miyoshi, which centers around Sherlock Holmes' infamous arch-nemesis, William James Moriarty, who seeks not to solve the perfect crime, but to commit them. It's basically Sherlock Holmes, but evil! At least, until it reveals the details of Moriarty's victims, since he specifically helps commoners get revenge on nobility who wronged them by, say, leaving their child to die, driving someone in need to suicide, or hunting them down for their own sadistic pleasure. It's intensely focused on the structural inequalities of its setting, both in the suffering it justifies and the abuse it lets slide, and its resulting exploration of individual and collective morality and whether an evil in one justifies putting an end to an evil in the other is a fascinating twist on the typical Holmesian story. But other thrillers have more simple premises, by mixing and matching well-established tropes with more sinister plot lines, like Talentless Nana, directed by Shinji Ishihara, produced by Bridge, and based on the manga of the same name by Loose Boy and Iori Furuya, in which superpowered children called Talented are sent to a secluded island to study and train in preparation for what they're told is a war with the enemies of humanity, as the titular Nana, under government orders, secretly takes them all out one by one before they realize the truth. So, effectively, My Hero Academia meets among... Oh, everyone's already made that joke? So effectively, My Hero Academia meets Death Note, Hero Complex and all. And while admittedly the comparison to the latter may be overstating its complexity quite a bit, I think it still pulls some interesting twists out of it, creating daunting risks for its central assassin as she figures out the most effective way to deal with these literal forces of nature, and whose clashes with one in particular leads to a tense game of cat and mouse as they each try to get the drop on the other, even if its execution of said game does tend to stumble here and there. But not all these crime series are so serious, as exemplified by Great Pretender, an original crime comedy directed by Hiro Kaburagi and produced by Studio Wit that follows Makoto Edamura, a small-time conman who gets caught up in the antics of an international group of con artists looking to swindle the world's shadiest professionals, Robin Hood style. And I just can't get enough of this damn show. The 50s inspired aesthetic, the jazzy music, the gorgeously layered backgrounds, the vibrant color schemes, the angular character designs, the characters themselves and their larger-than-life personalities, the cons, the long cons, the big ol' fuck you, I need to reconsider how I see this world mega cons. It's an absolute spectacle dripping with style I just adore. Speaking of style, in a very different context, Rentagirlfriend is a romantic comedy directed by Kazuomi Koga, produced by TMS Entertainment, and based on the manga of the same name by Reiji Miyajima that follows Kazuya, who, after being dumped by his first girlfriend after a month, decides to, well, you know, the title, and quickly finds himself and the girl he rents, Chizuru Mizuhara, stumbling into a series of misunderstandings that forced them to maintain their relationship's romantic facade. And admittedly, it is some trashy bullshit. Its first few episodes are filled with enough secondhand embarrassment to fill several hours worth of cringe compilations, but not only is it an impressive production on a technical level with some fantastic direction and animation, particularly in its OP, but there's just something oddly compelling about watching these deeply flawed characters trying to figure out how to become better people. But if you're looking for a romance that's normal, Adachi and Shimamura is a gay romance directed by Satoshi Kurobawa, produced by Tezuka Productions, and based on the light novels of the same name written by Hitomi Aruma and illustrated by Non, about Adachi and, well, Shimamura. What's with these titles being so self-explanatory? Two high school girls whose chance meeting blossoms into friendship and eventually into something more. And it's one of those shows I think perfectly captures those early feelings of teenage life, and in particular, teenage romance. From the painfully awkward interactions as you stumble over your own words to talk to your crush and spend hours agonizing over everything you said afterward, to the disconnect you can feel from those around you as you try to figure out who you are and what you like. It's just some wholesome Yuri nonsense that I think most people will be able to relate to in one way or another. Also, there's an alien. There have also been a few shows to take a dive into more fantastical territory too, with my favourites being of the weird witch-based variety, like Wandering Witch: The Journey of Elena, directed by Kazuyuki Furuyasu, produced by C2C, and based on the light novels of the same name written by Jogi Shiraishi and illustrated by Azure, which follows this titular and admittedly egotistical traveller as she, inspired by the adventure book she grew up on, travels across the world to see what kinds of wonders lie in wait. There's an almost Kino's Journey-esque appeal to this show, in seeing all the weird ways this world's whimsical setting manifests in different places. But what got me the most is its tonal whiplash, as it'll go from this to this, back to that, and round back to this, over only a few episodes. It has no qualms about whipping back and forth between goofy fun and edgy melancholy to explore every facet of its world, and there's something about the confidence with which it does so that I can't help but appreciate. But some shows seem to just take an idea and run with it, such as Burn the Witch, an anime film / 3-episode miniseries depending on how you watch it, directed by Tatsuro Kawano and Yuji Shimizu, produced by Studio Colorado, and based on the manga of the same name by Tite Kubo, which follows two witches, Noel and Nini, as they work in reverse London to keep the world safe from the destructive power of dragons. Everything about this OVA feels like a classic shonen series, sometimes for the worse, but mostly for the better, and not just because it's set in the same world as and by the same author behind the classic shonen series, Bleach. Every character has such a strong personality, design, and such imaginative powers. Like, there's a dude who graffitis the fucking sky to cage a dragon on top of a clock tower, and I think it's at its best when it's treated almost like a slice of life, letting its characters just interact and stumble into the crazy twists and turns waiting to be found around every corner of their world, and I can't wait to see where it takes things in the future. But it's not just the anime world that's been putting out witch-based fantasies recently, since Disney Television Animation recently released The Owl House, created by Donna Terrace, which follows Luce, a nerdy kid on her way to a juvenile detention summer camp who stumbles through a portal and into a world of magic and mystery where, with the begrudging help of Ida the Owl Lady and her adorable demon king, learns to become a witch. That's right, motherfuckers, I'm adding a Western-made cartoon as a bonus show on the anime list, and you can't stop me! Jokes aside, this is probably my favorite show of the last few months, if for nothing else than simply how much fun it is. Its weird and wild world is bursting at the seams with creativity, whether it be in the many ways magic manifests both naturally and in nature, or in the boiling isle itself, which is grown out of the long-dead corpse of a fallen titan. And it's something its endearingly geeky characters and their respectively nerdy antics are more than happy to indulge in, whether they want to admit it or not. It's a show that embraces the uniquely quirky aspects of its world and characters instead of trying to hide it all away and make it fit a more conventional mold, generally and on a narrative level. And while it being a kid show means it kind of beats you over the head with that message, it's something that I still can't help but appreciate. Though what I don't like is the fact that on Disney Plus the first episode is missing, and it's especially frustrating because this keeps being a thing on this damn service. Why the fuck are so many shows missing episodes, Disney? But all in all, The Owl House is simply a fun show I just adore. And yeah, those are my thoughts. Happy late holidays and happy new year! 2020's finally over! Although, to be honest, I doubt things are gonna get much better in 2021 with the way things are going, but hey, maybe we'll get lucky. Also, as you may have noticed, I decided to try a couple new things with this video stuff, with doing these videos at the end of the anime season, since that's when I feel most people would probably be most interested in them, and going with a more sketchy look for the animations, since I think it fits the aesthetic a little better and just eases the workload of making them every time, which not only means I can do more of them, but also means I can spend more time adding to the ones I actually do. I'm not sure if I'll keep it, but I do like how it ended up turning out. Anyway, hope yous are staying safe, keeping your distance, washing your hands, wearing a mask, and let me know what yous think. If yous agree, disagree, what your top things from the last few months were, what you're looking forward to next season, etc. And thanks for watching. If yous enjoyed this and want to see more, then check out my last video, where I go into maybe a little too much detail about Decadence, and why its unique details, for better and for worse, make it a show to remember. Or watch me ramble about Vampire Hunter D Bloodlust, and why its tragic qualities make it so captivating. And don't forget to like, comment, share, and of course, subscribe to come fly with me. Hit the bell, stay notified, follow me on Twitter for more updates, ramblings, and poor attempts at humor, follow me on Instagram for semi-regular art stuff, and hopefully, I'll see yous later.